just thinking in the best interests of those kids that have special programs for them at their school. If they go NCLB, they don't get called back. But if they're Overflow and we're busing them, then there's an opening, then they get back to their school where the special programs that are there designed for their needs.
I understand. So my only concern is that if we don't take the opportunity to make this reduction, just as other school districts in our area have made in a very similar way, or have never offered this because it wasn't required, if we don't take advantage of that, then the cut may be programmatic. The cut may happen directly in the classroom. The cut may happen to one of our programs versus the transportation.
So you really think you like the idea of a mom with her stroller walking her second grader over, you know, a mile someplace in the rain?
Ms. Demler, I don't like any of these.
Well,
ideas.
no, but I mean,
I didn't sign up for this board to come to board meetings twice a month to decide what I'm going to take away from kids. But that is the position that the state of California has placed us in. So
I understand.
I value what you're bringing to us, and I think it is very valid and is worth consideration. It makes me sick to make these cuts. It's ridiculous. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility as a Board of Education to make sure that the school district remains solvent. That is our, you know, that responsibility cannot be underscored enough. It's just, you know.
You've been on the board for a long time and you've made a lot of cuts, and I understand you've made a lot of cuts at all ends of the spectrum. But since I've been on the board, we have cut mostly the socially disadvantaged students. When we closed schools and now this, so my experience has been not evenly done. Now I realize that other cuts were made earlier before I got on that were more, you know, hit other areas, but I just think this is not right. And
I hear you.
Can I ask just more of a pragmatic question, because I happen to agree that we've hit the socioeconomic harder, having just talked to Glenbrook and Holbrook parents. When we talk about, Ms. Demler came up with this compromise of shortening that 1.5 miles. What is the cost savings then? Are we, when Mrs. Goki mentioned that we would save, you know, 6 routes at $20,000 each, if it goes down to 1.5 miles for some of those students, what impact does that have on the savings? Because the point, if we're going to traumatize a neighborhood, the point is we better be able to save as much as possible because we have hit these neighborhoods. So what's the difference in these two proposals? Do we know?
Well, again, I think the difference is that the students would be allowed to get, you know, go on the No Child Left Behind buses, which are already running, and then they're already being charged a Title I. And so now, you know, I think where we would get up a cost, like currently Meadow Homes, we have, you know, a student going to Bancroft, 4 going to El Monte, 1 going to Gregory Gardens, 1 going to Mountain View, 1 going to Pleasant Hill Elementary, 3 going to Silverwood, 5 going to Sun Terrace, 4 going to Westwood, 2 going to 4 going to Woodside, and 4 going to Wren, and then and so if we were able to move the overflows to one of those schools, then the costs would be mitigated because they're getting on a bus that we're already running. If we all of a sudden had to, and it couldn't be at Cambridge, which is within the 1.5, or YVE, which is in the 1.5, then, you know, obviously we would be transporting students. So again,
so we can't project what changing it from 5 to 1.5 miles, how that impacts the cost savings.
Again, until the first day of school, when we really see the whites of their eyes and they're in seats and we know that they're on the campuses. I know that at Meadow Homes they've been going through a process since last spring to do home verifications, and so they've been students that they weren't able to verify that they're in their attendance area. They did again try to contact multiple times in the past 4 weeks, and they haven't. People they can't get a hold of, they're dropping, and so these numbers we got last Thursday, they've still been going through that process. So really it comes down to the first day of school and, you know, how many kids, because again, if I look at kinder, and there's a big difference between saying I'm going to move 18 kindergartners from from Meadow Homes, which is right now the number of English-only student class that want an English-only class. There's 11 openings on that campus in a kindergarten, and that's a bilingual kinder. So there would be a big difference between finding one of those schools that I mentioned, finding 7 spots, and finding 18 spots. So again, we're going to work with Dr. Newland on looking at that, and we will be able to get it cleaned up, and hopefully by Friday we will then have a hard number of students that we really need to be transferring. And again, because it's a QUIA school, we've not only do we have the contract, but we have the state mandates around QUIA funding that we need to meet. So I wish I could just give you an X amount of numbers, but again, I think what we would be doing is working with Ms. Goki and her staff to maximize the use of No Child Left Behind transportation and get these kids on those buses. And so it would not be an increased cost to be able to do this. I go back to Ms. Mayo. I think it would be very appropriate for us to do both in January and at the end of the year cost savings based on these recommendations, and if further distance needed to be added, you would at that point add further distance if we needed to. Not that you want to, and I know sometimes it's better to do everything in one fell swoop, but in this case, again, I'm hoping that we can mitigate the overflow issue, and we're already having to spend up to 20% of our Title I funds on either transporting students to other schools or on paying for after-school assistance. So the funding is there in our Title I funds for these program improvement schools. So again, unfortunately, I can't tell you a definitive amount.
And should we postpone this, say, to September 10th meeting? Would we have better data and not impact teacher assignments?
Well, I don't think it will impact teacher assignment. My concern with the September 10th date is that we will try to start overflowing students as quickly as we can. And so the goal would be actually next Monday to start telling students that they're going to be overflowed to new sites so they don't get attached. The younger elementary school children. I would think that in some of our situations where the families will be transporting the students, we'd be better off notifying them sooner. And in fact, if there's a way to notify them tomorrow, I'm sure we would try and notify them as soon as possible so they can just show up at the first school that they need to go to on Wednesday. So that would be my only concern is that if we wait till September 10th board meeting to make a decision, then all of those families would be in limbo.
So are these parents we can call personally and contact them directly?
The way it goes
it's not
is
thousands.
The schools create the lists, and they have the list, so they know the last in who's coming in enrolled the last. So what we do is we say, please contact the last 4 families on your list that are in kindergarten. They are now going to be going from Ayers to Silverwood. So then the office staff calls them up, and they would notify them and say your child's going to be going to Silverwood. They are expecting you, and she'd call the Silverwood staff, giving him the names of the 4 families, so that we would then expedite getting them enrolled and into the classrooms. Again, it's just an example, but just last week we were trying to move students early on, and we moved 2 students, we approved 2 students moving to Valverde, and lo and behold, the parents went in today to enroll them and then called Miss Locke and say they're not letting me enroll them. And Miss Locke calls the school, and lo and behold, 2 other 5th graders walked in that live in their attendance area this morning to enroll. And so, unfortunately, it's not a perfect or exact science, but we are trying to get the information to the families as quick as possible.
Is there going to be any impact from intra-district then? Transfers? It's going to be irrelevant.
Well, Mrs. Stuckey-Smith has been working with her team diligently on inter-districts. I think we've already approved anybody who's in the district moving around. We've approved those, and we've also approved people that requested to leave, and we've approved as many as we can coming in.
And those inter-districts, I'm assuming, would be on the same regards as any of the overflows, that if 2 people from their neighborhood moved in, inter-districts would get bumped back to their home school.
Yes, we do know, yes, we notify families that we are giving them a placement pending. The only students that don't get bumped are NCLB.
After the first year.
After the first year.
So I just had one other comment. Ms. Hanson spoke about the